Welcome to this introduction to the Transforming Grief program for first responders and co-responders. These are the people on the front lines in our communities who bear the brunt of our violence and our concerns and worries, and they often go underappreciated. And so this is an informational session. Some of the topics we're going to cover here are grief, trauma, and loss, how language is important, some of our responses to loss, and also the reactions of others to our grief. We're going to talk about addiction and post-traumatic stress, compassion and empathy, and we'll see a short video on restorative justice. So first of all, the question is, what is grief? Grief is a normal, natural response to any unwanted change. It can be getting something you don't want or not getting something that you do want. There's the individual experience of the grief of this young mother whose 14-month-old baby died suddenly while she was at work in his crib. And then there's the collective grief that we experience in the world. Law enforcement and others have to deal with all of these problems of the society: racism, sexism, child abuse, homophobia, violence, global warming, police brutality, disease, political unrest, riots, sex trafficking, homelessness, famine, poverty, climate change, homicide, and suicide. Of course, it's hard to see all of these things at once, but these are the things that our first responders have to deal with. And so my mentor, Megan Devine, has this nice short video that I want to share with you, and it's called How to Help a Grieving Friend.
So what do we do about all the pain we see in the world? All the pain we feel in our own lives? And why does it seem like our best efforts to help somebody feel better always backfire? I've been studying intense grief and loss, baby death, violent crimes, accidents, suicides, and natural disasters. And I've learned something really interesting. Cheering people up, telling them to be strong and persevere, helping them move on, it doesn't actually work. It's kind of a puzzle. It seems counterintuitive, but the way to help someone feel better is to let them be in pain. This is true for those giant losses and the ordinary, everyday ones. Educator Parker Palmer writes, "The human soul doesn't want to be advised or fixed or saved. It simply wants to be witnessed, exactly as it is." He's talking about acknowledgement here. Acknowledgement is this really amazing multi-tool. It makes things better even when they can't be made right. For example, somebody's struggling. Their baby died, or there's been a bad accident, or their mom got sick, and they're just sad. It's way more helpful to join them in their pain than it is to cheer them up. But here's what we tend to do instead. You have 2 other children, you need to find joy in them. Or, you know what you need? You just need to go out dancing and shake it off. Or, I felt really sad once. Did you try acupuncture? We're not really sure what to do with someone's pain, so we do what we've been taught. We look on the bright side. We try to make people feel better. We give them advice. It's not like this is nefarious. We try to cheer people up because we think that's our job. We're not supposed to let people stay sad. The problem is, you can't heal somebody's pain by trying to take it away from them. Now, acknowledgement does something different. When a giant hole opens up in someone's life, it's actually much more supportive to acknowledge that hole and let pain exist. It's actually a radical act to let things hurt. It goes against what we've been taught. In order to really support you, I have to acknowledge that things really are as bad as they feel to you. If I try to cheer you up, you end up defending yourself and your feelings. If I give you advice, you feel misunderstood instead of supported. And I don't get what I want either, because I wanted you to feel better. It's pretty rare that you could actually talk somebody out of their pain. Rarely does the admonishment to look on the bright side actually heal things for someone. It just makes them stop telling you about their pain. It's so tempting to try to make things better. When somebody shares something painful, it's much more helpful to say, "I'm sorry that's happening. Do you want to tell me about it?" To be able to say, "This hurts," without being talked out of it, that's what helps. Being heard helps. It seems too simple to be of use, but acknowledgement can be the best medicine we have. It makes things better, even when they can't be made right.
So there's another expert named Gabor Mate, and he's written a couple of really good big books. The Myth of Normal is one that is highly recommended. So it's also subtitled Trauma, Illness, and Healing in a Toxic Culture. So he talks about capital T trauma and small t trauma. Capital T trauma is those huge traumatic events that happen. Well, it's actually the scar, the wound that is inside of us after suffering through these huge events. The event is just a traumatic event itself, but it's what we carry with us afterwards. And the small t trauma is the accumulation of day-to-day ongoing insults and pain, especially like in childhood, you're just not given what you need and you're dismissed and told not to cry and go to your room, and you're just constantly traumatized, but you don't even realize that it's trauma. So Gabor Mate is a good resource. And so his some of his ideas about trauma are that it's an internal wound and an emotional response that, as I say, forms a scar inside of us. So we feel lost and alienated and on edge and disconnected from ourselves and from others. And if it's not managed or handled or brought out or dealt with or supported, it can lead to really dangerous behaviors and even terrible violence. So, and then we have the collective trauma, as I said before, an example of the George Floyd murder. This one, of course, is the memorial in New York City to the September 11, 2001 assault or attack on the Twin Towers when they fell that day. I remember it well. And so the trauma from that event still lives in many, many people. And so here is a short video of one of the police officers who was there that day. And his name is Ron Griffith. And this comes courtesy of OC 87 Recovery Diaries, which is a very good website resource. So I want to let you watch this video.
I think a lot of different things motivate people to become police officers. Really, there's only 3 types of police officers. Person that goes in that wants to make an hourly wage. The other person wants to be a hero. And the other person wants to fix things. I identified myself early. I wanted to be a hero. I would have done anything to be a hero. My early years in the force, it was a little challenging and difficult. That was the time of the crack epidemic, so there was a lot of shootings, a lot of homicides, a lot of assaults, a lot of crime. I had the opportunity to see the very worst of people, in the early part of my life. In police culture, no one ever admits that they're weak. No one ever admits that they're hurting. If you were in a shooting or a real bad incident, the job would send you to see, a psychologist, and we would know exactly what to say and say it so we can get right back out. There was rubble all over the place. When we got directly underneath the building, I could hear cracking. I looked up. We went over to the side of a building, held onto the building. I could feel the debris brush by us. So we went in and we started the recovery mission. We searched through that rubble forever. that day. I've never felt so more defeated. You know, I wanted to be in emergency service because, again, I wanted to be the hero and I wanted to rescue people, and I rescued no one. That hurt me. That hurt me bad. We spent a couple of months there sifting through things, recovering unidentifiable people, carrying out our co-workers who had been there. A lot of those guys were responsible for training me. A lot of those guys I worked with, and we left those guys. We left them, and then it was over. I thought that when I left the job in 2004, all my worries would be gone. Unfortunately, I found out that that wasn't the case. A lot of different things that happened. It's 9/11, shootings, homicides, and some things that don't even seem related. Sandy Hook hurt me. Boston hurt me. It's all of that. I became a control freak. I thought my way was the right way, and it was the only way. I would have these emotional, angry outbursts, and I didn't even notice them. I was dysfunctional and abnormal, and my family suffered. And it took the loss of my family. I'm not home anymore. For me to understand who and what I was and understand there's a other way. At first, it didn't seem that it resolved anything for me because I was so stuck in my own reality. I had the opportunity to vent, and I saw how bottled up I was. I saw how angry I was. This mental trauma is different. Bones heal quickly, but your brain? I mean, 9/11 is how long ago? And I still miss my friends. I still feel responsible, like I left them there. It's natural when you see trauma to experience pain. That's normal. And we isolate ourselves from it, and we insulate ourselves from things like that so we can stay strong, so we can continue doing our jobs. But we do have to recognize that all that stuff is going to be packaged, and it's going to have to come out sooner or later. So we should learn about diets and about exercise early in our career so we can manage that stuff while we're going through. You know, when we get to these incidents, if we go to a child call and that call bothers us, we have to talk about it. We can't just bottle it up because it's going to hurt us later on. I'm still evolving, I'm still growing, and I'm still healing. In the last few years, I've really dedicated myself to service. I've coached track. We have food drives, and we do clothes drives, and all the things that I do, the sharing, the giving, the mentoring, all will help me recover from my own personal injuries.
So he made it very clear that it's so hard to deal with grief, trauma, and loss, especially when it's on a wide scale. So it's important also to remember, learn about, your local crisis center. Just put their phone number in your phone now. Like, be prepared. Go to the website and see what they have to offer. Sometimes they just have some really good free counseling or support groups. So that's important to remember. So Megan Devine, she's the one who made the video that we watched in the beginning. She has a book called It's Okay That You're Not Okay. And she talks about grief illiteracy in our society. She says the way we deal with grief in our culture is broken. We suppress our grief. We try to put it away and cover it up. And as Ron said, it's going to come out. It's going to surface anyway. So what are some of our common responses when we have a loss? Memory and concentration, it's just hard to even focus or remember what you were doing. Isolation and disconnection, just feeling like there's no one in the world that would understand or that you would want to talk to. It's better, you feel like it's better to just go in your room and get under the covers and not relate to anyone. And that's okay for a bit. I mean, of course, but isolation is it's cold and hard and dark. It's an emotional roller coaster ride. Your ups and downs are extreme. You might be, just laughing one moment and just crying your heart out the next. When my daughter died, I was just moaning the big mother grief moan before I went to bed, as soon as I woke up. Um, and also, so sleep and eating and our health is disturbed. And also, I want to say that all of these, um, situations and conditions could lead to a misdiagnosis and also medication for depression or something like that, which really would just delay your process because grief looks, a lot like what they call depression. So having the right support is way to go. Then how other people react when we have grief. That uncomfortable feeling of not knowing if you should talk to someone or call them or ask them how they're doing. So sometimes people might avoid just speaking honestly, or they just might avoid us altogether. Some might suggest that we take medications or drugs or alcohol, or they go with the have faith, God had other plans for you. There's everything happens for a reason, and those kinds of platitudes. Or they may just leave us alone. And so I want to talk a little bit about feeling like a victim, because that's a very common feeling for many of us. And really, at times in the past, it's true that bad things have happened. Many of us in childhood and beyond have been victimized. And we tried to cope with the pain. But if we move through our lives continuing to feel like a victim, it's detrimental, because underneath that we have power, we have choices, and so when we have good support, it can enhance our feeling of power, being powerful in our own lives. Now, this is a short video by Gabor Mate. And it's about addiction. And of course, we have these coping mechanisms that we use to, instead of expressing our grief, we suppress it and we turn into coping mechanisms. So it can turn into serious addiction. And I want you to watch this short video.
All the substances of abuse, whether they're opiates or cocaine or anything else, they're actually painkillers. Some of them specifically are painkillers. But physical pain and emotional pain, the suffering is experienced in the same part of the brain. So when people suffer emotional rejection, the same part of the brain will light up as if you stuck them with a knife. The Eckhart Tolle says very nicely that addictions begin with pain and end with pain. So that all the addictions are attempts to soothe the pain. So when I work with addictions, the first question is always not why the addiction, but why the pain. And what you find is emotional loss or trauma. In the case of the severe addicts, as in the downtown East Side here, they were every single one of them traumatized. There's no women walking the streets here who had not been sexually abused, not even by accident. But whether it's a sex addiction or internet or relationship or shopping or work addiction, these are all attempts to get away from distress. Keith Richards, the Rolling Stone guitarist, said, who used to have a severe heroin habit, as you know, he said that all the contortions we go through just not to be ourselves for a few hours. Well, why would somebody not want to be themselves? Because they're in too much distress and too much pain. So I don't care what they tell you about genetics or any of that choices or any of that nonsense. It's always about pain. Well, the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, it's got a wonderful line in it. Whatever you do, don't try and escape from your pain, but be with it. Because the attempt to escape from pain is what creates more pain. And that's the reality with addiction. But the question is, how can people be with their pain? Well, only if they sense some compassion from somebody. So as another teacher says, only when compassion is present will people allow themselves to see the truth. So addicted people need a compassionate present which will permit them to experience their pain without having to run away from it. And all the attempts to run away, it's like another teacher says, the surest way to go to hell is to try to run away from hell. So you gotta be with that pain. You just have to be with it, but you have to have some support. And we live in a society that, one way or the other, is always about instant relief, quick satisfaction, distraction. In other words, we live in a culture that is based on, both economically and psychologically, on not supporting people to be with themselves. So it's always the quick getaway. So it's very difficult to deal with addictions in a society. But yeah, it is a matter of, at some point, finding a way of being with your pain so that you can actually get to know what it's really all about.
So I just want to share one little personal note here. My most significant loss was my daughter, Naomi, and she died on February 11th of 2015 at the age of 38. And when she was 12, she had her first overdose. And when she was 14, she had her baby. And she lived with addiction because she tried to suppress her grief, and I didn't have the resources or the wherewithal to help her well enough at the time, because I was struggling as a single mom coming out of my own trauma. So, it's been a lot. And so it was after she died, I was on Words with Friends is what this was, the little game Words with Friends. And this popped up. And I took a screenshot of it because I was like shocked and really distressed when I saw it. It was just surprising, and it says Naomi C accepts challenges. So, but I do want to say that ongoing, as this happened a couple of more times, I began to kind of see the humor in it, and think of her as not just dead, but in some other place, dancing and having fun and partying and being a light unto the world. So what was really painful just became a little more delightful and creative as I was accepting her death. So going on to share about how creating safety and how important that is. We have to build trust in our relationships. It is better to be alone than to open yourself to someone that you can't trust. And so we have to have discernment and caution. And I think these two guys have probably done a good bit of work on building trust between them, because their very lives are in each other's hands. I thought this was fun because I took this long distance photo in the French Alps, and once I looked closely at the photo, it appears that there was Yoko Ono. But she also has a companion or someone there to watch over her and to be with her. So what does real support feel like? Well, this photo of these birds at the beach in Florida is kind of a really good example, because, we walk side by side, we're in step with each other. We are the same, even if our appearance is different, we're the same humans with needs. And we don't have to be sitting across the room from each other, staring each other in the face and talking heads. We can just feel nature and feel space together and allow for each other to just be. It's very important that we use our words carefully. There are so many words that have certain meanings that we just need to be careful. So, things to say, like Megan Devine said in the video, "I'm so sorry that happened. Would you like to talk about it? And if not, then that's fine." It's good to say, "I'm here with you. I hear you. I'm not going away. You don't have to say anything. I feel you." Just that presence, that, just caring presence is so important. And we know things not to say would be, she's in a better place. He had a long life. Well, he was in his mid-90s, or you can have other children, or, all these things that are designed to dismiss the grief and avoid it. So just be careful as your thoughts come. So in the work of transforming grief, it's very important that we keep 3 agreements because we want safety. So they are complete confidentiality. And that means that we would never reveal what someone said in confidence outside of either the pair or the group that we're with. Emotional honesty means that you allow yourself to express the emotions you feel. Some are considered good emotions, some are considered bad, but really they're just feelings. And so we need to feel free to be honest and express ourselves. And also to remember that everyone is different. Everyone has a different point of view, lifestyle. So we just don't judge one another. We listen, we're clear, and we give respect. This quote by the Dalai Lama, the 14th Dalai Lama, says, people were created to be loved. Things were created to be used. The reason why the world is in chaos is because things are being loved and people are being used. So that's pretty profound. That came from goodreads.com. And now this is an attorney. I think she's out in California, Sujata Baliga, and she made a movie called Healing Justice. It's a World Trust film. And this is just a short clip from that film. Go ahead and play it. Da dun dun da da dun 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 da dun dun da da dun.
We received a case about a stolen car. And we reached out to the young person, and he pretty quickly took responsibility for it, and was very open to meeting with his victim and making it right, and explained that he was really poor, but he was willing to get a job and try to figure out, how to do right by the victim. So we reached out to the victim, and the victim was extremely unhappy that the case had been diverted. She actually knew a little bit about diversion because she worked for a law enforcement type entity, and was adamant that she had been out of pocket $4,000 in costs because of this car, and wanted to see $4,000. And so in meeting with the young person and his family, his mother is undocumented, working multiple jobs. They were living in the most in the kinds of poverty that we just shouldn't have in the United States, with so many other people's children living with them just to have a place to eat. And I knew that this mother and this young man were not coming up with $4,000. And so the person I was training at the time asked me, so are we going to send the case back? Because there's no way this woman's getting what she wants. So I go back to her and I say, would you have any interest in doing this even if $4,000 might not be the outcome? Is there some other reason to do this? And she'd brought a friend with her that day, and he said, I would really love for you to move forward. And she said, I would just want to meet with this kid and tell him that what he did wasn't okay. And her friend said, I really like to meet with this young man too. And so on the day of the conference, it was very powerful. Her supporter, the person who had come with her, at one point, as the youth who'd stolen the car couldn't remember what color the car was, and it became evident that he'd stolen many cars, and the victim is getting angrier and angrier, and you're never going to learn your lesson. And at this point, her friend leans in and he says, I know you. And my heart stopped, because I was like, oh, we usually research these things better, and I had no idea there was a pre-existing relationship between these two parties. And he says, I know you because I used to be you. And he proceeds to tell the most powerful story about how he himself got caught up in stealing cars, and it derailed his life, and how he got his life back on track. And it was as if the rest of the room disappeared, and this young man This man who turned his life around engage in a dialogue about how does one turn one's life around, and he says, you know, you have to stop hanging out with your homies in the way that you used to, but don't cut them out of your heart. Just don't include them in every aspect of your life. So you show up for the baptism, but you don't stay for the after party, right? And you always say, I got to get to work, and they respect that. So what makes you happy? What do you believe in, you know, about yourself? Or what are you good at? And the kid puffs up and he says, you know, I'm a really good artist. And his mother starts laughing. And she says, you can't pay this woman back $4,000 with your art. And just then the victim jumps in and she says, oh, yes, he can. Yes, he can, actually. She was so moved by this dialogue, right, that she says, if he paints me a Tinkerbell as tall as I am, it's like she's about 5 feet tall, as tall as I am, I'll forgive all the debt. And we're all looking at each other like, a Tinkerbell? I'm sorry, did she say Tinkerbell? So I start taking notes, and she's describing the exact Tinkerbell and what color the Tinkerbell needed to be, and it had to be an old school one without too much cleavage, so she's very particular about the Tinkerbell. And the kid is really excited, but he's also like, I don't know how I would canvas and what she's describing. And I'm like, well, find you a community artist person who will help you with this. And so I was thinking of my friend Evan, who I knew would definitely be interested in doing this. And so ultimately, the young man does paint this. He just, within a few weeks, he got a job, he raised enough money for all the art supplies. He wanted to do it himself. Painted the most amazing rendition of Tinkerbell on canvas, and the victim asked him to bring it to her home and help him install it, you know? And then he ended up getting involved with other community art projects and actually getting involved with the program at Community Works, where he had been involved in this case, you know, and just helping out other kids who'd gotten in trouble. So his life turned around completely, and he stayed out of trouble consistently after that. And the Tinkerbell was really beautiful. But I think what's really, when people ask what do victims want, you know, it's different in every case. And I always think you never know, it might be Tinkerbell. Like, you have no idea what is going to leave a crime victim satisfied. So some people might say, oh, that's soft on crime. He stole a car and he gets to paint something. But if that's what the victim wanted, and that's what keeps him out of trouble for the rest of his life, then we should be really happy about Tinkerbell.
Da-dun-dun, da-dun. Da-dun-dun, da-dun.
So that's Sujata Baliga and the good work that she does with restorative justice. So I want to thank you for being here, and I hope you've learned a few things and got some food for thought. My work is Transforming Grief, LLC, out of Gainesville, Florida, but I work also on Zoom. Grief, trauma, and loss support and education, and I'm also an end-of-life doula. I'm on the board of the Florida End-of-Life Doula Alliance, which is a nonprofit organization here in Florida. My email is goodgriefwoman@gmail.com, and you can check out my website, shantivani.com. If you'd like to talk, text me first, and then we'll connect. My number is 352-225-1385. And my nickname is GoodGriefWoman. It's been a great pleasure, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks.